The alarm screamed through every corridor of Nexus Prime Research Station. Captain Minho ran toward the command center, his boots hitting the metal floor in steady rhythm. Around him, scientists from a dozen different alien species rushed in the opposite direction, their faces showing pure terror. Minho had seen fear before. He grew up in the military, spent 15 years in special operations back on Earth, and another decade commanding human vessels in deep space. But this was different. These weren't just scared people. These were species who had survived for thousands of years, who had technology humans could barely understand, and they were running like children from a nightmare. He reached the command center and found chaos. Screens showed readings that made no sense. Numbers climbed and fell without pattern. Doctor, Gina stood in the middle of it all, her fingers dancing across holographic displays, her eyes wide but focused. Gina, report, Minho said, keeping his voice calm. She looked up at him, and he saw something in her expression that worried him more than the alarms. Gina was brilliant. The kind of scientist who got excited about dangerous stellar phenomena, the way other people got excited about puppies. If she was scared, things were very bad. It's a void storm, Captain, she said quietly. The readings match ancient records from dead civilizations. 17 extinct species documented these phenomena before they vanished completely. Minho moved to her side and looked at the main display. Something was approaching their sector of space, but calling it a storm felt wrong. It looked like reality itself was tearing open. Where stars should be, there was darkness. Not the darkness of empty space, but something else. Something that hurt to look at. How long until it reaches us? He asked. 6 hours, Gina replied. Maybe less. It's accelerating in ways that shouldn't be possible. The door opened and Lieutenant Deho entered, followed by Yona from engineering. Deho's face was flushed from running, his hand resting on the weapon at his hip even though guns wouldn't help against what was coming. Yona looked calmer, but her fingers twitched like she wanted to be fixing something instead of standing around. The alien crews are evacuating, Deho reported. Every ship is preparing to run. The Talaxian flagship is already pulling away from the station. Cowards, Yona muttered. Smart, Minho corrected. If the historical data is accurate, running is the logical choice. Has running ever worked? Deho asked. Gina shook her head. No species has survived a void storm. Not one. The records show that advanced civilizations with technology far beyond ours tried everything. End quote. Shields, dimensional jumps, faster than light escapes. Nothing worked. The storm caught them all. The command center doors opened again, and 3 alien figures entered. High Prelate Voth moved slowly, his reptilian body covered in ceremonial robes that marked his status as one of the oldest beings in the Coalition. Behind him came Commander Rethus, whose insectoid features were rigid with barely controlled tension. Last came Seeker Nam, floating in his containment suit, his gaseous form swirling with colors that indicated distress. Humans. Voth's voice was deep and measured. Your presence is required for evacuation. Coordination. The Coalition fleet is gathering at Rally Point 7. We must leave this sector immediately. What about the research station? Gina asked. There are still scientists here. 300 beings working in the lower levels. They have been notified, Rethus said, his mandibles clicking rapidly. Transport ships are being dispatched. But we cannot wait. The storm approaches. Seeker Nam's voice came through harmonic frequencies that the command center's speakers translated into words. The storm remembers. It has consumed 17 races before you. Their screams still echo in the void between atoms. Minho exchanged glances with his crew. Screams echoing in voids between atoms. That was the kind of poetic horror that made him want to punch something, even though he knew punching wouldn't help. We'll coordinate the evacuation from our ship, Minho said. The Endurance is docked at Bay 7. We can be ready to launch in 30 minutes. 20, Yona corrected. I can cut the safety checks. 47 vessels are preparing to depart. Voth continued as if Minho hadn't spoken. 12 species. The largest evacuation operation in Coalition history. We must maintain order. Voth. We. Voth. Voth. Continued as if Minho hadn't spoken. Order. Deho laughed, the sound bitter. The next 3 hours were madness. The Endurance's crew worked with brutal efficiency, loading refugees from the research station while simultaneously preparing the ship for departure. Minho coordinated with other vessels, trying to create some structure in the chaos, but it was like herding cats who were on fire and being chased by wolves. Gina spent every spare moment downloading data from the station's archives. She found fragments of information from civilizations that faced void storms thousands of years ago. The Prethori, a species that existed 15,000 years before humans left Earth, had documented their final hours as the storm approached. Their last transmission was simple and terrible. We cannot adapt. We cannot endure. Captain, Gina called out as Minho passed through the research lab. You need to see this. She showed him the Prethori data. Images of a civilization at its peak, with cities that floated in the air and technology that looked like magic. Then images of those same cities torn apart, not by explosions or fire, but by reality itself breaking down. Buildings phased in and out of existence. People aged centuries in seconds or reversed back to infancy. Space folded and unfolded like paper in the hands of an angry god. The Prethori were more advanced than the Talaxians, Gina explained. They had 50,000 years of technological development, perfect understanding of quantum mechanics, and dimensional theory. It didn't matter. The storm killed them all in 43 minutes. Minho studied the images. Part of him wanted to look away, but he forced himself to watch. If they were going to face this thing, he needed to understand what they were up against. Did any of the 17 species survive? He asked. Even a small population? 2. No, Gina said softly. Total extinction. Every time. The storm doesn't leave survivors. It erases species from existence like they never mattered at all. The ship shuddered as Yona fired up the main engines. Over the communications system, Deho's voice came through. Captain to the bridge. The fleet is moving. We're last in line. And that storm is getting closer. Minho left the lab and ran to the bridge. Through the main viewport, he could see the Coalition fleet pulling away from the station. 47 vessels of different sizes and designs, all racing toward the edge of the sector. Behind them, still distant but growing, was the storm. It had gotten worse. The tear in reality had widened, and now Minho could see things moving inside it. Not physical objects, but concepts given form. Shadows of extinct civilizations, screaming silently across the void. Mathematics that ate itself. Colors that didn't exist in normal space. All personnel secured. Yona reported from engineering. We're ready to run. The Talaxian flagship is pulling ahead, Deho said. Their engines are twice as powerful as ours. Half the fleet is already faster than we are. Minho watched the storm advance. Numbers ran across his tactical display, showing approach speed and estimated intercept time. The math was simple and cruel. Even at maximum speed, some ships wouldn't make it to the sector edge before the storm caught them. The Endurance would be one of those ships. Captain, Gina's voice came from the science station. The storm is accelerating again. It's not following normal physics. It's like it's hunting us. Rethus, who had remained on the bridge to coordinate with his people, made a sound like grinding metal. Hunting. Yes. The ancient texts spoke of this. The storm seeks consciousness. It is drawn to thinking beings like predators to prey. Can we hide? Deho asked. Shut down all systems. Go dark? The 17 extinct species tried that, Gina replied. It didn't work. The storm finds consciousness itself, not technology. On the view screen, the first ships entered the storm's edge. 3 vessels, all from different species, all trying to maintain their shields and defensive systems. The shields lasted for exactly 4 seconds. Then the ships began to come apart. Not from physical damage, but from existence itself, breaking down around them. Minho watched beings die in ways that shouldn't be possible. He saw a Vulcan cruiser phase between dimensions, its crew visible one moment and gone the next. Their screams cutting in and out like a bad radio signal. He saw a Talaxian science vessel age 10,000 years in 30 seconds, its hull corroding and crumbling while its crew turned to dust. "Captain," Deho's voice was tight. "Orders?" Every instinct told Minho to run. Get the engines to maximum. Try to stay ahead of the storm. Maybe they'd get lucky. Maybe they'd be fast enough. But he'd seen the data. He'd watched 3 ships die. Running wouldn't save them. Minho looked at his crew. Deho, gripping the controls with white knuckles. Yona, already calculating power distribution for emergency maneuvers. Gina, still studying the storm even as it approached. His crew. His people. Humans who grew up on a planet that spent millions of years trying to kill their ancestors. "Turn us around," Minho said quietly. The bridge went silent. "Sir?" Deho asked. "Turn the ship around," Minho repeated, louder this time. "We're not running. We're going through." Voth, Rethys, and Gnome all made sounds of protest in their various languages, but Minho ignored them. He opened a channel to the entire ship. "All hands. This is the captain. We're going into the storm. Not around it. Through it. I won't lie to you. The odds are we all die in the next hour. But humans don't have a great track record with listening to odds. Strap in and hold on. We're about to find out if Earth made us tough enough for this." The Endurance turned, its engines flaring as it reversed course. While 46 ships ran away, one ship flew directly toward the impossible darkness, toward the storm that had killed 17 civilizations. Toward extinction. "All power to forward shields," Minho ordered. "Yona, I need you to keep this ship together no matter what physics says." "Understood, Captain," Yona replied. Physics can go to hell. The storm rushed toward them, filling the view screen with darkness that hurt to perceive. In those final seconds before impact, Minho thought about Earth, about humanity's history of facing impossible odds and surviving anyway. Ice ages, asteroid impacts, supervolcanoes, world wars. "Here we go," Deho whispered. The Endurance entered the void storm, and reality stopped making sense. The first thing that broke was gravity. Minho felt his body lift from the command chair, then slam back down with crushing force. His ribs cracked. Blood filled his mouth. Then gravity reversed, and he was floating again, the pain in his chest already fading as time rewound the injury that just happened. Around the bridge, crew members experienced the same chaos. Deho gripped the pilot controls so hard, his fingers left dents in the metal. Using the harness straps to keep himself connected to the chair, Yona's voice came through the intercom from engineering, cursing in 3 languages as she manually routed power through systems that kept phasing in and out of existence. "Shields at 70%. Someone called out. But Minho couldn't tell who, because his vision kept doubling. He saw the bridge as it was now, and also as it would be in 10 seconds, and also as it had been 30 seconds ago, all at the same time. "Captain, we're getting readings from outside," Gina shouted over the chaos. She was strapped into her science station, blood running from her nose as the pressure changes affected her sinuses. "The Coalition fleet is breaking apart. The Talaxian flagship just lost structural integrity." On the view screen, what remained of the Eternal Harmony tumbled through space, its hull cracking like an egg. The ship had been massive, 10 times the size of the Endurance, built with technology that was ancient when humans still lived in caves. It lasted 8 seconds inside the storm before reality tore it apart. Smaller vessels fared even worse. A Vulcan destroyer simply ceased to exist, not exploding or breaking apart, but vanishing from space entirely, as if it had never been built. A Etherian science ship phased between dimensions, its crew's harmonic screams cutting through the radio channels before going silent forever. 47 ships entered, Gina reported, her voice mechanical as she focused on data instead of horror. 46 are destroyed or unresponsive. We're alone. The bridge lights flickered, died, then came back in colors that didn't belong in normal space. Minho looked at his hands and saw them aging rapidly, skin wrinkling and bones showing through, then reversing back to youth. He was watching himself die and be reborn every few seconds, and his mind screamed that this was impossible, but his eyes kept showing him the truth. Rethis, report? Minho called to the Vulcan commander, who was still on the bridge. The insectoid warrior didn't respond. He sat frozen in his chair, his compound eyes reflecting images of things that shouldn't exist. His mandibles moved without sound, and the translator on his suit couldn't make sense of what he was trying to say. He had broken, his warrior training useless against an enemy that couldn't be fought or understood. High Prelate Voth was worse. The Talaxian elder had curled into a ball on the floor, his robes wrapped around him, making sounds like a child having nightmares. His species lived in a collective consciousness, millions of minds connected across light years. The storm had severed that connection, leaving him alone in his own head for the first time in his 2,000-year life. Seeker Nam's containment suit had cracked. The gaseous Etherian inside was dissipating slowly, his colors shifting through patterns that meant terror and pain. He had been able to see the future, but the storm existed outside of time. It had broken his perception and left him blind and dying. The alien survivors were finished. Their minds couldn't accept what was happening, but the humans kept working. Deho, status, Minho ordered, forcing his voice to stay calm, even as he tasted blood from injuries that happened and unhappened in rapid succession. Instruments are useless, sir. Deho replied, his voice strained but focused. They say we're in 17 different places at once. They say we're moving forward, backward, and sideways through time. They say the ship doesn't exist. I'm ignoring all of it and flying by gut. Good, keep us steady. Define steady, in a place where physics is having a nervous breakdown. Deho shot back, but his hands never stopped moving on the controls, making constant tiny adjustments to keep the endurance from tearing itself apart. In engineering, Yona's situation was worse. The reactor core had started fluctuating wildly, putting out 10 times normal power, then dropping to 0, then spiking again. The alien safety systems that were built into the ship kept trying to shut everything down to prevent a catastrophic failure. But shutting down in the middle of the storm meant certain death. So Yona did what the alien engineers who designed the Endurance would never have done. She started ripping out safety systems and bypassing fail-safes. When the reactor threatened to overload, she vented plasma directly into space instead of through the proper cooling channels. When the power conduits started melting, she rerouted everything through backup systems that were never meant to carry that much energy. This is insane, she said to herself, her hands burning on hot metal as she worked. Every safety regulation says this should kill us all. But the regulations were written by people who never faced a void storm. She finished bypassing another safety system and felt pain shoot through her arm as reality glitched around her. For a moment, her arm existed 10 feet to her left, still holding a wrench but no longer attached to her body. Then it snapped back into place, and the pain was gone. But the memory remained. Pain means I'm real, Yona whispered, using the mantra to keep herself focused. Pain means I'm still here. I can work with pain. On the bridge, Gina had been analyzing the storm, while trying not to go insane from what her instruments were showing her. The data made no sense. Temperature readings that went into negative infinity, distances that were simultaneously 0 and infinite, time that flowed in loops and spirals instead of forward. But then she saw something, a pattern in the chaos. Captain, she called out, I have an idea, but you're going to think I'm crazy. We're flying through a storm that kills entire civilizations, and reality doesn't work anymore, Minho replied, blood still dripping from his mouth from injuries that kept happening and unhappening. Crazy is our baseline now. What do you have? The storm operates on quantum uncertainty, Gina explained quickly. At the quantum level, particles exist in multiple states until observed. The act of observation collapses the wave function and forces reality to choose one state. The storm is quantum uncertainty on a massive scale. It's reality refusing to collapse into one state. I understand those words individually, Deho called out, but together they sound like science fiction. The point is, Gina continued, human observation affects quantum systems. We learned this 1,000 years ago with the double-slit experiment. When we observe quantum particles, we change how they behave. What if that works on the storm? Minho tried to follow her logic, while his body kept aging and reversing randomly. You're saying our minds can affect the storm? By observing it? Not exactly. But human consciousness evolved on Earth, which means it evolved to handle chaos. Every other species in the coalition came from stable worlds, perfect orbits, predictable climates. Their minds expect reality to be consistent. When the storm breaks those rules, their minds break with it. Look at Voth and Rethus. They can't function. Minho looked at the broken aliens on his bridge, then at his human crew, who were injured and terrified, but still working. So, what's your solution? We route all critical ship functions through human neural interfaces. We use human perception to stabilize reality around the ship. Our brains are wired to handle uncertainty and chaos. We make that the ship's operating system. That's the craziest thing I've heard today, Deho said. I love it. Let's do it. The process took 20 minutes of work that felt like hours, because time kept stretching and compressing around them. Yona and her engineering team installed neural interfaces throughout the ship, connecting human consciousness directly to the Endurance's systems. It was dangerous, untested, and completely violated every safety protocol the Coalition had established. It worked. As human minds connected to the ship, reality stabilized around them. Not completely, and not perfectly, but enough. The gravity fluctuations slowed. The time distortions lessened. The Endurance became a bubble of semi-stable reality moving through the chaos of the storm. It's working, Gina said, amazement in her voice. The human crew is acting as quantum observers, forcing the storm to choose a single reality around the ship. How long can we maintain this? Minho asked. Unknown. The neural load is extreme. Crew members are experiencing the equivalent of running a marathon while solving complex math problems. Some will break. Some already are. Reports started coming in from throughout the ship. Ensign Hana in navigation had stopped responding, her mind locked in a loop of seeing her own death over and over. Technician Junho in Cargo Bay 3 couldn't remember who he was anymore after experiencing his entire life in reverse. 10 crew members were unconscious. 5 were dead from strokes caused by neural overload. But the others held on. We're losing people, Minho said quietly. We're losing fewer than the alien ships lost, Yona replied over the intercom, her voice harsh from screaming orders to her engineering teams. Every other vessel is destroyed. We're still flying. That has to count for something. The storm intensified. Reality bent further. Through the view screen, Minho saw things that his brain tried to reject. He saw the ghosts of extinct civilizations, the 17 species that died in previous void storms. Their consciousnesses somehow trapped in the spaces between atoms, like Seeker Nam had said. He saw mathematical concepts given physical form, equations that moved like living things and tried to eat the ship. He saw the heart of the storm, a place where reality didn't exist at all, where the concepts of space and time and matter were just suggestions that could be ignored, and he realized they couldn't go around it. The storm was too large. The only way out was through. Deho, Minho said quietly. Plot a course directly to the storm's center. The bridge went silent except for the sounds of failing systems and the low moans from Voth, who was still curled on the floor. Sir, Deho said carefully, that's the worst part of the storm. The place where the Prethori civilization died. Where reality completely breaks down. If we go there, the neural interfaces might not be enough. I know, Minho replied. But we can't outrun the storm. We can't go around it. So we go through. Through the worst of it. Through the center. Through the place that says we can't exist. He opened a channel to the entire ship. Knowing many crew members wouldn't hear him because they were unconscious, or dead, or broken by what they'd experienced. All hands, this is Captain Minho. We're heading to the storm's center. Not because I think we can survive it, but because it's the only path I see that has even a chance. Every person on this ship volunteered to serve in deep space. We all knew the risks. We all knew space doesn't care about us. The storm is just space being honest about how much it wants us dead. But Earth spent 4 billion years trying to kill our ancestors, and we're still here. Ice ages couldn't kill us. Asteroids couldn't kill us. Supervolcanoes couldn't kill us. We're humans, and being too stubborn to die is what we do best. Hold on. Stay conscious if you can. And if you see impossible things, remember that humans made a living doing impossible things since we figured out how to make fire. This is just another impossible thing to add to the list. The Endurance turned toward the heart of the void storm, toward the place where reality itself gave up trying to exist, toward the cosmic wound in space that had killed 17 civilizations before them, toward extinction or survival. There was no third option. The center of the void storm was worse than death. Death at least made sense. Death followed rules. The storm's heart followed no rules at all. Deho flew blind, his instruments showing readings that contradicted each other. The navigation computer said they were moving forward at light speed. The proximity sensors said they were stationary. The time display counted up and down simultaneously. He ignored all of it, trusting his instincts instead, feeling his way through space like a blind man, walking through a familiar room. Left, he muttered to himself, adjusting the controls. No, right. No. Both. How am I supposed to fly in 3 directions at once? But somehow he did it. His mind, evolved from ancestors who hunted prey across African plains, using nothing but pattern recognition and intuition, found paths through the chaos that computers couldn't calculate. He flew by feel, by gut instinct, by the same neurological wiring that let primitive humans track animals for days without maps or instruments. Behind him on the bridge, Minho watched crew members struggle with reality breaking down around them. Ensign Bora at communications kept her station running, even as her hands aged and reversed every few seconds, her fingers becoming skeletal, then young again, over and over. She typed commands with hands that were sometimes 30 years old and sometimes 70, and she never stopped working. Communications are impossible, she reported, her voice steady despite the horror. But I'm maintaining internal ship channels. Engineering can still hear us. Good work, Minho said, and meant it. Terror management was a skill humans learned young, growing up on a planet with earthquakes and hurricanes and predators. Fear was natural. Working through fear was survival. Gina hunched over her science station, analyzing data that shouldn't exist. The storm's center was a place where the laws of physics had given up and gone home. Temperature, pressure, time, space, all meaningless concepts here. But she kept measuring, kept recording, because that's what scientists did. They looked at the impossible and took notes. Captain, she called out. I'm detecting something. Echoes in the storm. Consciousness fragments. The 17 extinct species. They're still here. Somehow. Their minds are trapped in the quantum uncertainty. Can we help them? Minho asked. No. They've been here for thousands of years. Some of them. The Prithori civilization has been screaming in this storm for 15,000 years. They're beyond help, but their presence tells us something important. What? The storm doesn't just destroy physical matter. It destroys consciousness itself. It breaks down sentient thought into quantum uncertainty. The reason those civilizations died is because their minds couldn't handle existing in a place where reality is optional. They broke, and once broken, the storm kept them. Minho felt cold despite the temperature fluctuations around him. So what makes us different? Why are we still functional? Gina looked at him, her eyes reflecting strange lights from instruments that were measuring impossible things. Because human minds expect chaos. We evolved in it. When reality breaks down, we don't break with it. We just get annoyed and work around it. As if to prove her point, Yona's voice came through the intercom, crackling with static and fury. Captain, the reactor just tried to exist in 4 different quantum states at once. I told it to pick one and behave. It listened. I don't understand how, but yelling at the universe seems to work. That's very human of you, Minho replied, almost smiling despite everything. Yeah, well, my grandfather used to say that sometimes the best tool in your toolbox is pure spite. I'm spite engineering this reactor into staying online. Throughout the ship, similar scenes played out. Human crew members faced impossible situations and responded with anger instead of despair. When corridors phased into alternate dimensions, repair teams cursed and worked in 2 realities at once. When life support systems said they should be dead, medical staff rewired them and said the systems were wrong. When the hull started breaking apart, engineering crews welded reality back together with metal and attitude. But people were still dying. A section on Deck 9 decompressed when space folded wrong. 12 crew members were lost instantly. On Deck 4, time accelerated in a localized pocket, and technician Sora aged 50 years in 30 seconds, her body crumbling while her mind screamed. Medical Officer Kyung ran to help people whose bodies were being torn apart by physics going insane, and there was nothing he could do except hold their hands while they died. We're down to 198 crew members, Gina reported quietly. We've lost 149 people. Almost half the crew. Minho closed his eyes for a moment, feeling each death like a weight on his chest. These were his people, his responsibility. And he'd led them into the storm because he saw no other choice. The guilt would come later if they survived. Right now, he had to keep the living alive. All remaining crew, this is the captain, he said over the ship-wide channel. I know you're scared. I know people are dying. I know this seems hopeless. But look around you. Look at what we're doing. We're flying through a storm that killed 17 civilizations. We're still here. We're still fighting. That counts for something. Voth, who had been catatonic on the floor, stirred slightly. His massive reptilian eyes opened and looked at Minho with something between awe and horror. How? He croaked, his voice broken. How do you function? My people lived for 100,000 years. We built an empire across 1,000 stars. And this storm destroyed everything we made in minutes. But you, humans, barely evolved, barely civilized. You just keep working. How? Minho knelt beside the alien elder. Because Earth never gave us the luxury of perfect conditions. We learned young that the universe doesn't care about us. So we stopped caring what the universe thinks. We survive because we're too stupid to know when we're beaten and too stubborn to quit even when we do know. Commander Rethus, still frozen at his station, made a sound like breaking glass. His translator started working again, converting his words. My species has 12,000 years of warrior tradition. We pride ourselves on courage in battle. But this isn't battle. This is existence itself attacking us. I don't know how to fight non-existence. You don't fight it. Deho called back while adjusting the controls to avoid a spatial anomaly that had just appeared directly in their path. You acknowledge it's there, flip it off, and keep flying anyway. The Vulcan warrior's mandibles clicked in what might have been laughter, or might have been a breakdown. "You're insane. Your entire species is insane." "Probably," Minho agreed. "But we're still flying, and everyone else is dead, so maybe insanity is what this situation requires." The storm intensified further as they pushed toward its center. Reality didn't just bend anymore. It stopped pretending to exist. Crew members started seeing impossible things. Not illusions or hallucinations, but actual impossible things that were somehow real. Lieutenant Hana saw herself dead, not as a vision but as an actual corpse floating in the corridor next to her, while she was still alive and walking. The corpse watched her with dead eyes, and smiled. She screamed, then kept walking to her duty station, the corpse following behind her like a ghost that had learned to be solid. Technician Junho experienced his birth, childhood, adult life, and death all simultaneously. He existed as a baby, a teenager, a middle-aged man, and a corpse at the same time. All four versions of himself, occupying the same space. His mind tried to break from the paradox, but some deep part of his brain that had evolved to handle Earth's chaos kept him functional. He was all ages and no age. And he just accepted it and kept working. Yona, in the heart of engineering, watched the reactor core start producing energy that defied thermodynamics. It was generating more power than it consumed, creating energy from nothing, which was impossible. She should have shut it down. Every safety protocol said to shut it down. Instead, she routed that impossible energy into the shields. And the shields held against forces that shouldn't exist. "The universe is breaking its own rules," she said to her engineering team. "So we're going to break our rules too. If reality doesn't work anymore, then we make our own reality. One that includes us staying alive." Gina made a discovery in the sensor data that changed everything. "Captain, I've been analyzing the neural interface feedback. When human consciousness interacts with the storm, something happens. The storm responds. Not with intelligence, but like it's reactive. We're forcing quantum states to collapse through observation. But it's more than that. We're forcing the storm to acknowledge our existence." "Meaning what?" Minho asked. "Meaning, the storm says we can't exist here. Physics says we can't exist here. Reality itself says we can't exist here. But we're choosing to exist anyway. And somehow, that choice matters. Human stubbornness is having a measurable effect on quantum uncertainty." Deho laughed, the sound slightly unhinged. "We're surviving through weaponized stubbornness. That's the most human thing I've ever heard." They reached the storm's center. The absolute core where reality had given up completely. Through the view screen, they saw nothing. Not darkness or light, but the absence of anything that could be seen. It was a place where sight didn't work because light itself couldn't decide whether to exist. The ship should have come apart. Should have ceased to exist. Should have been erased from reality like the 17 civilizations before them. Instead, Captain Minho stood on his bridge, surrounded by his broken, bleeding, terrified crew, and made a choice. "All hands," he said quietly into the ship-wide channel. "The storm is telling us we can't exist. Physics is telling us we're impossible. Reality itself is saying we're not allowed to be here. I have one response to that. No. We exist because we choose to exist. We're real because we say we're real. And I don't care what the universe thinks about it. On my mark, we're going to collectively refuse to stop existing. We're going to choose to be real. We're going to tell reality that we're here whether it likes it or not. 3, 2, 1. Exist." 200 voices said the same word at the same time. 100 humans, scattered through a dying ship, all making the same, impossible choice. Exist. The storm wavered. Quantum uncertainty collapsed. The human crew, connected through neural interfaces, connected through shared stubbornness, connected through 300,000 years of evolutionary history that taught them the universe is hostile, and survival is a choice you make every day, forced reality to acknowledge them. They existed because they chose to exist. And somehow, in a place where physics had no meaning, that choice mattered. The endurance held together, held steady, held real, and began moving forward through the storm's center, through the place where no species had ever survived, through the cosmic filter that had killed 17 civilizations, through extinction, because humans had learned a long time ago that impossible just meant it hadn't been done yet. 1 year after the void storm, the galaxy looked different. Not physically, but in the way species thought about survival. The old certainties were gone. Technology wasn't enough. Knowledge wasn't enough. Understanding wasn't enough. The universe had proven that advancement meant nothing if you couldn't adapt when reality stopped making sense. The coalition created something new. They called it the human doctrine. Though Minho hated the name, it made it sound like humans had invented survival, when really they'd just been forced to practice it more than anyone else. The core principles were simple. Embrace chaos over order. Value adaptation over preparation. Build psychological resilience. Instead of just technological superiority, accept that imperfection and survival mattered more than perfection and death. Simple to write, hard to implement, especially for species that had spent thousands of years building civilizations on the opposite principles. The training program started small. 50 elite warriors, scientists, and commanders from across the coalition came to Earth for what they called survival training. They expected advanced facilities and cutting-edge technology. What they got was Earth itself. Minho, now Admiral Minho, stood before the first training group in a desert somewhere in central Australia. The temperature was 45 degrees Celsius. At night, it would drop to near freezing. The trainees looked uncomfortable in the heat, their various biological systems struggling with the conditions. "This is your classroom," Minho told them. Earth, the planet that taught humans how to survive. For the next month, you'll train here. Not in simulations, not in controlled environments. Here, where conditions change rapidly, and nature doesn't care about your comfort or your life. A Talaxian trainee, a young officer named Keth, raised an objection. "Admiral, this seems primitive. Surely we can learn survival principles in more controlled conditions?" "You're right," Minho agreed. "You could learn the theory in a classroom, but the void storm didn't care about theory. It cared about whether you could function when theory stopped working. Earth will teach you that lesson better than any classroom." The training was brutal. Alien trainees were placed in harsh environments with minimal equipment and told to survive. Deserts where temperature swung wildly, coastlines racked by storms, volcanic regions where the ground could open beneath your feet. Orbital stations with deliberately unreliable systems. One exercise became legendary. Trainees were put in spacecraft simulations with cascading system failures. The scenario was designed to have no perfect solution, just a series of bad options getting worse. Most alien trainees froze, waiting for proper solutions that never came. Human instructors gave them duct tape, wire, and basic tools. "Fix it," they said. "You have 10 minutes before life support fails completely." The aliens who succeeded were the ones who stopped looking for perfect solutions and started making imperfect ones work. A Vulcan warrior named Tesh bypassed every safety system and routed life support through the waste reclamation system, which violated 20 regulations but kept everyone alive. A Talaxian scientist named Mora rerouted power in ways that should have caused an explosion, but instead stabilized the reactor. "Good enough," the human instructors said. "Not perfect, but good enough. That's the lesson. Perfect solutions take too long. Good enough solutions keep you alive." Commander Rethis, who had been on the Endurance during the storm, became an instructor. He told his students about his own failure, about freezing in terror while human crew members kept working. "I was trained to face any enemy," he said. But the storm wasn't an enemy I could fight. It was reality itself, attacking us. Humans didn't fight it. They just refused to let it stop them. Learn that refusal, or you'll die when the universe stops cooperating. The training spread. What started as 50 trainees became hundreds, then thousands. Coalition military academies added chaos training to their programs. Engineering courses taught creative system bypass alongside proper procedures. Command training emphasized psychological resilience and decision-making under impossible conditions. Meanwhile, the endurance crew had scattered to new assignments, each carrying the lessons of the storm with them. Captain Deho commanded the Relentless, a mixed-species vessel with human and alien crew. He trained alien pilots in what he called instinct flying, the ability to trust gut feelings when instruments failed or gave contradictory information. A young Etherian pilot named Quinn struggled with the concept. Her species relied on perfect mathematical calculations for everything. "How can I fly without data?" she asked. "You don't fly without data," Deho explained. "You fly when data becomes meaningless." In the void storm, my instruments said, I was in 17 places at once, moving in directions that don't exist, traveling through time, backwards. If I'd trusted the data, I'd have frozen. Instead, I trusted my instincts, my pattern recognition, my gut, and we survived. Quinn learned slowly, fighting against millions of years of evolution that taught her species to trust calculations over feelings. But she learned, and when her ship encountered a spatial anomaly that scrambled all sensors, she flew through it on instinct alone and brought her crew home safe. Yona ran the Coalition Engineering Corps, teaching alien engineers that rules were guidelines rather than laws of physics. Her classes focused on creative problem-solving and learning when to ignore safety regulations. Safety regulations exist for a reason, she told her students. They keep people alive in normal conditions. But when conditions stop being normal, regulations become suggestions. In the void storm, I violated every safety protocol the Endurance had. I vented plasma without proper containment. I routed power through systems never designed for that load. I bypassed fail-safes that were supposedly mandatory. And we survived, because I prioritized function over procedure. A Talaxian engineer named Pole objected. "But that's dangerous. You could have killed everyone." "I could have," Yona agreed. "But following proper procedures would have definitely killed everyone. Given a choice between might kill us and will kill us, I chose might. That's the human approach. We take calculated risks, and we calculate fast." Dr. Gina directed the Stellar Anomaly Response Center, studying cosmic phenomena that defied conventional physics. Her office had a plaque that read, "The universe doesn't care about your theories. Make it care." She led a team of mixed-species scientists investigating unusual stellar events, teaching them to accept when their understanding was incomplete and work anyway. When they encountered a star that was aging backwards, violating thermodynamics, the alien scientists wanted to study it until they understood what was happening. "We'll study it," Gina agreed. "But we're also setting up containment protocols now, before we understand why it's doing this. Because if it becomes dangerous while we're still figuring out the theory, we need to be ready to respond without perfect knowledge." The alien scientists were uncomfortable with this approach, but they followed her lead. When the star's reversal suddenly accelerated and threatened nearby inhabited systems, the containment protocols Gina had prepared without full understanding saved 3 billion lives. "But we still don't understand why it happened," one scientist complained. "We'll understand eventually," Gina replied. "But those 3 billion beings are alive now because we acted before we understood. Sometimes, survival comes before knowledge." Then the sensors detected something that made the entire galaxy hold its breath. Another void storm, forming in the outer sectors. This one was larger than the previous storm. Much larger. And it was heading directly toward the Coalition core worlds. 20 billion lives were in its path. Evacuation was impossible. There was no time, no ships, no way to move that many beings before the storm hit. The Coalition Council convened an emergency session. Panic filled the chamber. Representatives from every species shouted proposals, each more desperate than the last. Some suggested abandoning the core worlds. Others wanted to try to deflect the storm somehow. A few wanted to build massive shields, even though shields had failed completely in the previous storm. Minho sat quietly through the chaos, watching species that had survived for tens of thousands of years fall apart in fear. He understood their terror. They'd seen what the void storm did. They knew the odds. Finally, he stood and cleared his throat. The chamber fell silent. Everyone knew his name now. Admiral Minho, the human who survived the impossible. "We can't run," Minho said simply. "We can't hide. We can't deflect it. The storm is coming, and 20 billion people are going to face it, whether we're ready or not. So here's what we do. We get ready." "But the last storm killed everyone except your ship," a counselor objected. "How can we be ready for something that destroys entire fleets?" "Last time, we survived by accident," Minho replied. "We didn't know what we were doing. We just refused to die. Now we know what we're doing. Now we can teach everyone else. We've spent a year developing the human doctrine. Now we put it to the test." The plan was ambitious and terrifying. Instead of running from the storm, they would face it. A fleet of 200 vessels, representing all 12 coalition species, would position themselves between the storm and the inhabited worlds. Every ship would have human crew integrated into critical systems, using the neural interface technology that had kept the Endurance functional. The fleet would use the techniques humans had learned. Adaptation over perfection. Function over procedure. Stubbornness over surrender. Instead of trying to avoid the storm, they would do what the Endurance did: go through it. "You're asking us to deliberately fly into extinction," a military commander said. "I'm asking you to trust that extinction is survivable," Minho corrected. "If humans can do it, so can you. But you need to think like humans. When reality stops working, you keep working anyway. When physics fails, you improvise. When the universe says you can't exist, you tell it to go to hell and exist anyway." The preparation took months. Ships were retrofitted with neural interface systems. Crews trained in chaos drills, practicing how to function when nothing made sense. Psychological conditioning helped alien crew members accept uncertainty and improvisation. Communication protocols emphasized improvisation over procedure. The fleet gathered at the edge of the core worlds. 200 vessels representing the combined military might of the coalition. Minho commanded from the rebuilt Endurance. Beside him was Voth San, grandson of High Prelate Voth, who had taken his grandfather's lessons to heart and become one of the coalition's finest commanders. "My grandfather died believing his people were too rigid to survive chaos," Voth San said as they watched the storm approach. "I intend to prove him wrong. We learned from you, humans. Now we'll show that learning wasn't wasted." The storm hit 3 days later. Reality broke down exactly as it had before. Gravity failed. Time distorted. Space folded wrong. Matter phased between dimensions. All the horrors that had destroyed the previous fleet came back, amplified by the storm's larger size. But this time, the fleet was ready. When gravity fluctuated, crews had practiced working in changing conditions. They strapped themselves down and kept functioning. When time distorted, they focused on the immediate task rather than trying to understand the temporal chaos. When instruments gave impossible readings, they trusted their training and instincts, and when alien crew members started to freeze in terror, human voices cut through the panic. "This is Lieutenant Bora on the Harmony's legacy. I see you're experiencing your death in multiple timelines. Yeah, it's disturbing. Ignore it and focus on your station. You're not dead yet, so prove those visions wrong." Engineering team on the Swift Vengeance. This is Ensign Taman. Your reactor is showing impossible readings. Root around them. Reality isn't working right now, so make your own. Trust me. It works. Navigation. This is Captain Deho, on the Relentless. Your instruments say we're in 12 places at once. Pick one, and fly like that's the real one. The universe will figure it out eventually. Ships were lost. The fleet took heavy casualties. A Vulcan destroyer was consumed when its crew couldn't adapt fast enough. 3 Talaxian vessels broke apart when their shields failed. An Etherian science ship phased out of reality completely. But the other ships kept going, kept fighting, kept surviving. Human crew members throughout the fleet stayed functional, their minds handling chaos that broke less prepared species. But more importantly, the alien crew members were adapting, learning, becoming stubborn in the face of impossibility. A Talaxian engineer named Keth, who had trained on Earth, rerouted his ship's power systems in ways that violated every safety regulation he'd been taught. The ship survived. A Vulcan warrior named Tesh flew her vessel through spatial anomalies, using instinct over instruments. Her crew lived. An Etherian pilot named Quinn kept her ship steady while reality fluctuated around her, trusting her gut over her calculations. They were learning what humans had known for millions of years. Survival doesn't require understanding. It requires refusal to give up. The fleet reached the storm's center, the place where reality ceased to exist. 200 ships, 12 species, 10,000 voices from across the galaxy, all facing the same choice the Endurance crew had faced a year ago. Minho opened channels to all ships. All fleet. This is Admiral Minho. The storm says we can't exist. Reality says we're impossible. Physics says we should be dead. Here's my response. And I want everyone to say it with me. No. We exist because we choose to exist. We're real because we refuse to be unreal. We survive because we're too stubborn to die. All ships, all crew, together. On my mark, choose existence. 3, 2, 1. Exist. 10,000 voices, human and alien together, spoke the same word. Exist. The storm wavered. 200 ships, their crews united in stubborn refusal, forced reality to acknowledge them. Neural interfaces carried human stubbornness throughout the fleet, spreading the refusal to give up like a virus of survival. The fleet pushed through the storm's heart. They lost ships. They lost people. 71 vessels were destroyed. 7,000 crew members killed. It was catastrophic by any historical measure. But 129 ships survived. 13,000 beings lived through a storm that should have killed them all. They walked through cosmic extinction and came out the other side, alive. When the fleet emerged from the storm, the entire coalition watched in amazement. Not one ship had survived the first storm, except the Endurance. This time, 129 ships made it through. The survival rate had gone from 2% to 64%. Still terrible. Still tragic. But survivable. The galaxy changed that day. Species that had built their civilizations on order and perfect understanding learned to embrace chaos and imperfection. Technology remained important, but psychological resilience became equally valued. Knowledge was still pursued, but the ability to act without complete knowledge was taught alongside it. Humanity's role in the coalition transformed. They were no longer the junior species, the newcomers who needed guidance. They were teachers, showing ancient civilizations how to survive in a universe that didn't care about age or advancement. A monument was built in coalition space, listing every being lost to both void storms. At its base, a plaque read, "They taught us that survival isn't about being strong, smart, or advanced. Survival is about refusing to accept the impossible." Humanity walked through the void. We learned to walk with them. 5 years after the second storm, the galaxy had faced 6 more void storms. Survival rates improved each time as more species learned the human doctrine. Chaos training became standard in every coalition academy. Engineers learned creative system bypass. Commanders learned to make decisions with incomplete information. Scientists learned to act before they completely understood. Dr. Gina, now chief scientist of the coalition, gave an interview that was broadcast across the galaxy. The reporter asked the question everyone wanted answered. How did humans survive what destroyed 17 civilizations? The answer is simple. Gina replied, smiling slightly. We're too stupid to know when we're beaten, too stubborn to accept defeat, and too spiteful to let the universe win. Some call it humanity's greatest strength. Others call it our defining madness. We just call it normal. Earth tried to kill us for millions of years and failed. The void storm was just another Tuesday. Admiral Minho stood on the bridge of the Endurance, looking out at a fleet of combined human and alien vessels. All bore the same motto on their hulls. We walk through. It had become the unofficial slogan of the Coalition Defense Forces, a reminder that survival meant facing impossible things and refusing to stop. Voth San approached, his reptilian features showing something that might have been a smile. His species had learned to express more emotion since the storms, adapting their rigid cultural practices to include more flexibility. Do you think we'll face worse than void storms? He asked. Minho shrugged. Probably. The universe doesn't seem to like us much. It's spent billions of years creating things that kill civilizations. We'll face more of them, and we'll survive? We're humans, Minho said simply. And you're learning to think like humans. Survival is what we do. It's what Earth taught us. And now, we're teaching you. When the next impossible thing tries to kill us, we'll do what we always do. What's that? Tell it no, flip it off, and keep walking. Because humans don't have a quit setting. We have it worked, and, at least we tried. And we've been trying for 300,000 years. We're not stopping now. We're here in story. We're here in better. Voth San, whose species had existed for 100,000 years, whose people had seen empires rise and fall, looked at this human, who had lived barely 4 decades, and he understood a truth that had reshaped galactic civilization. Age didn't determine strength. Technology didn't determine survival. Understanding the universe mattered less than refusing to be beaten by it. Humanity had survived the void storm not because they understood it, but because they didn't care whether they understood it or not. They just walked through extinction, through the impossible, through cosmic filters designed to destroy civilizations. They walked through because Earth had spent millions of years teaching them that the universe was hostile, and the only proper response was to survive it anyway. The void storm had been a test. 17 civilizations failed it. Humanity passed it. And now, humanity was teaching the rest of the galaxy how to pass it too. Not through technology or knowledge or perfect understanding. Through stubbornness, adaptation, and the simple refusal to accept that survival was impossible. The universe said they couldn't exist in the storm. They said they could, and in the end, their choice mattered more than the universe's physics, because humans had learned a long time ago that impossible just meant it hadn't been done yet, and nothing stayed impossible when humans decided it was their turn to try.